Back to the book. We were now being fed a meager amount of rice, but water situation was still critical. There was one very slow running faucet out in the yard with a flow capacity of about a quart every 15 minutes or so. The faucet was wide open, and that is still all it would deliver. So even now, if and when we got water, it had to be stringently conserved. There was a line at the faucet always 24 hours a day. Barely enough water to drink and definitely not enough to wash with. It had now been a week since we broke camp on Bataan, and we had not been able to wash since. From here on, I won't be able to recount what happened on a day-to-day basis, but I will try to tell what was going on under what conditions. As I mentioned earlier, we were now getting a small amount of rice each day, and for a change in menu, started getting vegetables. Not the part you would normally eat, but the part that was normally discarded. We were first given boiled carrot tops. I presume the Japanese were eating the carrots, and they generously gave us the tops. They might as well have kept them because they were inedible. They would not stay down. They were so horrible and strong, we would upchuck after a few swallows. By now, there were many sick people around with dysentery, malaria, and diphtheria. Every conceivable disease was surfacing because of the physical condition of the men and the unhealthy conditions under which they were living. The sick were in such bad shape that they no longer stayed in the barracks but remained outside, some under the buildings to stay out of the sun and some lying outside on the ground near the slit trenches. Their clothes were all covered with excrement, and some had discarded their clothes, preferring to be naked. These men had dysentery, and to die of dysentery was the most horrible way to go. They had to stay outside or near the latrines because with dysentery, you pass blood and mucus every 20 minutes or so. There is no way to keep from it. I know these men would have preferred dying fighting instead of in a horrible way that they were now going. Dysentery almost invariably meant death. I think I mentioned that my best friend had drunk polluted water and had come down with dysentery. Well, I now had the initial symptoms even though I did not drink. I was lucky, if you want to call catching dysentery lucky, in that my symptoms occurred a week or so after we reached O'Donnell. I was lucky because I found out that the leaves from the trees found on the prison grounds were a cure for dysentery. I was also lucky because there were still leaves to be found, and I was able to get a good pocketful of them, which I immediately consumed. In a few days, my symptoms disappeared, and also in a few days, the trees were stripped bare. Apparently, word had gotten out around that the leaves were a medicine, but there were not enough to go around. Dysentery spread so rapidly because of the open latrines and the millions of flies around them. They were the same big green flies that we saw in the dead bodies as we walked out of Bataan. There were so many that the branches of small trees around were bent to the ground. Sick men were also covered, especially those near the latrine, because the latrine itself held the greatest number. It was no wonder under these conditions that so many of the prisoners died. Besides the flies, the stench was something else that was always with us. It was everywhere, inside, outside, on you, and on everyone else. There was no way to get away from it. It came with the dysentery, and by now the dysentery was also causing the death of many, many prisoners. They were dying by the hundreds. We heard that as many as 400 were dying each day. And I remember I looked around to try and determine how many of us were still alive. I estimated that at the rate we were dying, we would all be gone within a month or so.